Hello and welcome to this Price a Job tutorial. In this video we'll be taking a look at the new Loft conversion template. Price a Job's template modules are a bit different from the regular estimate modules in that they greatly simplify major projects. Rather than having to select each module individually, all the required modules are now pre-selected in templates that allow you to quickly calculate price estimates for entire projects including bungalows, houses, extensions, garage extensions, and loft conversions. Loft conversion is the newest addition to the template library and is still currently under test mode, so please let us know if you notice anything wrong. To get started, first navigate to the templates category here in the module toolbar at the top and select Loft conversion and create. And you'll notice that the template module is a little bit different from the standard estimation modules in that there are no costs displayed here, just a sketch and a summary. We'll fill out the details of our loft conversion here in the right-hand pane. Price a Job will calculate a summary for us as we proceed, and the sketch pane helps the customer to visualize how the loft conversion will look. We can click on this sketch to angle the view to get a better look at our loft. We can use the scroll wheel on our mouse to zoom in or out on our sketch, and by clicking the scroll wheel, we can reposition the image within our sketch pane. As a point of reference, the patch of grass indicates the rear of the house, and if we circle around to the front, we'll see the front door on the front of the house. If we angle up to look at the loft conversion, we can see that currently the roof is transparent, but represented by a mesh grid to mark the roof line boundary. To adjust the visibility of any of the elements of our sketch, we can go here to the main stage and click the eye icon for visibility. And we see that the roof is already deselected. If we select this, then the roof becomes opaque again. We'll leave the roof set as transparent so that we can see our loft conversion. We can also set the walls to be transparent. And if we wish to remove the mesh grid here, Price a Job refers to that as the grid helper. We can deselect that, and that's removed from the sketch. But we'll leave that selected as a visual aid. As we proceed with our estimate, we can add dormers and roof windows and adjust the visibility of those. We can also choose to show or hide the dimension markings here on our sketch, and display or hide the description summary. So we'll leave these selected for now and close our visibility window. Now, starting at the top of our right-hand panel, we have options here for the existing house, and we can choose here whether this is a house or a bungalow, with a bungalow being a single-story building and a house being a two-story. Then here we can specify the dimensions of our house, including the length and the depth, and we can use the sliders to adjust these or input specific values as needed. And then using our mouse, we can scroll out to zoom out on our sketch and reposition the image as needed. Now we can specify the roof type, whether this is a gabled roof, or a gable with a hip on the right, or a gable with hip on the left, or a gable with hips on both sides. For this example, we'll choose a gable with a hip on the right, and then we can specify the roof pitch, and we can adjust this using the slider as necessary, or input a specific value. We'll input a pitch of 25 degrees. And then we can specify the type of existing tiles on the roof. And for this we might want to choose roof visibility, so we'll go to the visibility icon and select our roof and close this window. And then we can choose between Ludlow tiles, Mendip, Double Roman, Ludlow Plus, Modern, Duo Modern, Anglia, Wessex, Plain Tile, or Slates. And next we can click this button for Existing House, and here we can input some of our existing house settings. Starting with the existing walls, whether this is brick and block, stone and block, block and block, solid brick, solid block, or timber. For this example, we'll choose brick and block. Then we can specify the ground floor height. By default, this will be set at 2.4 meters. And then for the upper floor height, this is also set by default to 2.4 meters. And we can adjust these as necessary. And then here we can adjust the width of our soffits, and let's just angle our image so that we can see that a little bit better. Then here we can use the slider to adjust these, or input a value as needed. We'll set this at 250 millimeters. And then we can adjust the width of our gable. So again, we'll just angle around to the side where we can see our gables, and we can use the slider to view that, or input a value as needed, and again we'll input 250. And then we can specify the fascia and soffits, whether they are UPVC, timber, or none. So for our example, we'll set this as UPVC, and then we can specify the dimensions of the existing rafters. And perhaps for this house, our rafters are 47 by 145. When we're done inputting these settings, we can close the existing house settings window. Now we can move on to the new structure stage. And to start with, we'll take a look at the beams and posts. If we already know the costs of our beams and posts, we can input a steel allowance here. Otherwise, we can select from the drop-down menu and select manually. Here we can choose the type of beams or posts that are needed, either a universal beam, a universal column, a channel, a square section, a rectangle section, or either single, double, or triple layers of timber. To start with, we'll choose a universal beam and select our beam from the drop-down menu. In this case, perhaps we need a 254 by 102. And this beam will need to be the width of our house, so we can just double check that here in our width settings, which is 7,000 millimeters. So we can go back to beams and posts and input that here. And now we will need 2 beams to support our loft conversion, and we might be tempted to just double this value here to 14,000. But we don't want to do it this way, and there's a very good reason. If we take a look here under the edit icon by clicking the pencil, we can see that this beam also includes with it the pad stones for the ends. So here from the drop-down menu, we can choose whether we require no pad stones, or a pad stone, or a cleat, or a base plate, or a fin, or an end plate. And for each of these selections, we can use the drop-down menu to choose the material we prefer to use. Same thing with the second end. Now, if we were to just double this value to 14,000 to account for our 2 beams, not only might we receive the wrong size of beam, but we would also receive the wrong count of pad stones. So we can close this window and add another beam. And we'll just duplicate this one, 254 by 102, with a length of 7,000 millimeters. And this also comes with its own 2 pad stones. Now let's go ahead and add another beam. And maybe we have some trimmers around the stairs. So let's select from the timber options here. Let's add a timber beam. And for the materials, we'll choose for that a 47 by 225. And we'll set the length of that to 4,800 millimeters. And we'll open the edit icon here because we won't be requiring any pad stones for this. So we'll just select here, none. And then we can close this window. And now let's add one more beam here. This time we'll add a universal column. And we could choose the size here. And set the length. Perhaps this will be 7,000. And oops, I added an extra beam by accident here. I can remove that easily by clicking the bin icon. And then we can edit this universal column. And again, for the ends, we won't be requiring any pad stones. And perhaps you might have an instance where the ends are bearing on an existing wall or steel. We can just remove those. And now we're done with this one. We can close this window. And I think we're done with our beams and posts. So we can close the window now. And now we can move on to our timber and insulation settings. But I think before we do, I'm just going to re-angle our image here a little bit so we can have a better view of the roof. And I'm going to turn the roof to transparent again. And this gives us a better view of our timber. And now we can close the visibility window and move on to our timber and insulation settings. And we can see here PricerJob's default settings for flooring. And in this case, we might have 47 by 175. So we can just adjust that. And we can see that the sketch updates to show our specified flooring joists. And we can adjust the spacing of these as well. We'll change this to 500 millimeters, just so we can see the spacing. But I think in actuality, our floors will be closer to 400 millimeter spacing, so we'll leave that at 400. And then we can specify the type of insulation. And this is the insulation between the joists, whether there is none, PIR boards, slabs, or rolls of wool. We'll select roll and specify the thickness of our wool. In this case, we have 170 millimeter earth wool. Next, we can take a look at the Purlin walls. And these are the short side stud walls that rise to meet the gabled or hip roof. So by default, these are set at 47 by 95, and we can adjust that if necessary, but we'll keep that the same. We can also specify the spacing of our studs. And there are 2 layers of insulation. The first being the insulation between the studs, and the second being the insulation over it. So for this example, let's change our second insulation over the studs to foil and select a material for that. We'll choose the 45 millimeter. Next, we can take a look at the collared ceiling. And this is the flat rectangular ceiling that drops down below the roof line. And we can change the timber size of this as well. So let's change this to 47 by 145. And we can adjust the spacing of the studs as well. Again, there are 2 layers of insulation, and we'll stick with 100 millimeters in between the studs and 170 millimeters over. Next, we can take a look at the sloping ceiling. And this is the sloping ceiling which is against the gabled or the hip roof. And we have options here to extend this from the plate to the ridge, and this would be the full length of the sloped roof. Or we could choose from the purlin to the collar, and that is only the section here between the top of the purlin wall and the edge of the flat collared ceiling. Or we could set it from plate to collar, which would be from the edge of the roof line here all the way up to the edge of the flat collared ceiling. Or from the purlin to the ridge, which would be from the top of the purlin wall all the way to the ridge of the roof line. Generally, from purlin to collar is the most common, and this would be the default within the system. And this is because usually the purlin walls are insulated and the collar ceiling is insulated. So by only having to install an insulated ceiling in between these two is usually the cheapest option. And for the insulation type that you choose, this would usually depend on the thickness of the rafters. If there's a non-breathing membrane, then generally you have to provide a 50 millimeter air gap. So if you're not sure, take a look at your building regulation U-value calculation to figure out what insulation you require. For this example, we'll leave them at a combined default of 150 millimeters. Next, we'll take a look at the gable end walls. Now, these end walls may already be insulated, but if you need insulation, then we can select these, the type and the depth. But if the gabled walls are already insulated, we can just deselect this section, as we won't be needing it. Next, we'll take a look at the side voids, and these are the open areas here between the purlin walls and the roof slope. And we would want to insulate these to prevent cold from penetrating through the existing joists and flowing down into the ground floor. And these measurements would apply to all sides. So in this case, we have side voids on 3 sides because of our hip roof. But if we had a double hip roof, then we would have side voids on all 4 sides. But if we had a double hip roof, and we can just change that here, then you can see that we have side voids on all 4 sides. Alternately, if this was a gabled roof, then we would only have side voids on 2 sides. But for this example, because we have a gable and hip roof, we have side voids on all 3 sides. So we'll go back to our timber and insulation window and choose the insulation for our side voids. First the insulation for between the floor joists, and then the insulation on top. And any of these sections that we deselect will be completely removed from our estimate. So once we're happy with our settings, we can close the timber and insulation window. Next, we can specify our ceiling height. And we might want to have this set at 2.4 meters, which would be 2400 millimeters. As we can see, however, that takes our collared ceiling out of the range of our roof line. So to restore that to its maximum height, we can just change our roof pitch to any value here. We'll just say 30 degrees. And then restore that back to the 25, which it actually is. And that automatically resets the height of our collared ceiling to the maximum height of 1485. Now, if you choose to, let's just change our angle here so we can see this collared ceiling a bit better. We could increase the height of this ceiling right up to the very top of the roof ridge line until basically there's no collared ceiling left at all. But generally, an easier way to do this, if you want to have no collared ceiling, is just to go to your timber and insulation settings here and simply remove the collared ceiling. And then you can change the sloping ceiling settings from purlin to ridge. But for our example, we do want to have a collared ceiling, and we do want the sloping ceiling to go from the purlin to the collar, and we do want to have a collared ceiling at a reasonable height, so we'll just set this at 1400 millimeters. Next, we can specify the height of our rear, front, and hip purlins. So again, we'll just angle our sketch here for a slightly better look at these. And you can see here, as we adjust the rear purlin, we'll decrease the height, and it follows the slope of the roof. As it does so, it automatically adjusts for the end angle of the hip purlin. Alternately, if we were to increase the height of this rear purlin, it would still follow the slope line of the roof, and the end angle of this rear purlin would be adjusted for the hip roof. But we'll just leave these set at their default of 800 millimeters each. Next, we can take a look at the joist offsets for both the front and the rear. And we would use this if the new joists are not intended to extend to the outer wall. So for example, if these joists were to be resting on a steel beam, then we could shorten these floor joists only to the point where they cross the steel beam. And same thing with the rear joists as well. We could just adjust those to the point where the steel beam crosses. But generally, we recommend leaving these set at 0 offset in case these side voids are ever converted to storage, so the option will exist if needed. However, if you have an opening between floors, then you may need to offset the joists on one side and rest these on a beam. We can also do the same thing here on the left and right. Obviously on the left side we wouldn't want to do that because our loft conversion is sitting on these joists, so we leave that set to 0. But the right hand beams, if we chose to, we could leave an opening between floors here if needed. Because it's not necessary and we do want to leave the option for side void storage available for the future, we'll make sure that our joist offsets are set to 0. Now we can take a look at roof windows. And to properly view these, we'll go to our visibility options here and we'll select our roof again. And this makes the roof opaque so that we can see that. And then we can go back to the roof windows stage here and click the plus add roof window button. And this adds a roof window to the front of our house, and we'll just spin our sketch around so we can see that. And then we'll choose the size of our window. We'll choose just a 55 by 780. And then here we can choose the position of this window, whether it's on the front of the roof, the rear, or the right. Now if we had a hip roof on all 4 sides, then we'd be given an option of having the window on the front, rear, left, or right. But because we only have a sloped roof on 3 sides, we're only offered 3 options for the position of our roof window. In this case, we'll leave it on the front. And then we can edit the roof window settings by clicking the pencil icon here. And we can adjust our side offset. And as we adjust this side offset, we slide the window over onto our roof where we need it to be. And we can also use the on-plan offset, which is vertical. And for this, perhaps we want to make our roof line transparent again. So we'll go to visibility and make our roof transparent. And now we can see our window where it is in relation to our conversion. And here we'll increase the height of this so that the base of our new window is flush with the top of the purlin wall, which makes this window usable as a fire escape if needed. And we can add more windows if we want. Just click plus add new window, choose the position, front, rear, or right. We might want to have one on the rear as well. Just spin our sketch around and go into the edit icon here. Adjust our side offset, go to the on-plan offset to increase the height of this, there. And then we can close this window. Next, we can add dormers to this loft conversion. So simply click add dormer, and this adds a dormer to our roof. To adjust the settings of this dormer, just re-angle our sketch here for a better view. We can click dormer number 1, and this opens the dormer settings. Here we can specify whether our dormer will have a gable roof, or a hip roof, or a flat roof. For this example, we'll stick with a hip roof. And then we can choose whether this will be mounted on the front wall, left wall, right wall, or rear. We'll leave this one on the rear wall. And then we can set the dormer width. We'll say this one will be 1500 millimeters. And the dormer height. This one might only be 1100 millimeters. And you see that by reducing the height of our dormer, that it's turned our window red, showing a window error that the window size does not fit this size of dormer. So we'll fix that shortly. Then we can adjust our side offset, and we just adjust that the same way as we used the window offset, and the bottom offset as well. But ours is positioned well, so we'll just leave it here. Then we can specify the roof pitch in degrees of our dormer, and we'll leave that set at 30 degrees to match the pitch of our main roof. And then we can specify if our dormer will have a vaulted ceiling. We'll spin our sketch around. If we deselect vaulted ceiling, then the dormer will have a flat ceiling. So if we have a flat collared ceiling in our loft conversion, then we'd probably want to leave vaulted ceiling deselected so we have a matching flat ceiling for our dormer. And here, since we're on this side of the building anyways, we could change the position of our dormer to put it on the front wall if we wanted to. And now that brings us to our window. Now the window has been marked red because we have an error in that the height of our dormer is too short to fit this window. So to change this, we'll just click the Window Settings button here. And here we can change the style of opening we want in our dormer, either a window, or a UPVC door, or a composite door, or a French door, sliding door, bifold door, a garage, or just leave the opening empty. We'll stick with the window for now, and then we can choose from a wide variety of different window styles, and we'll just leave this with the default style 8. And then here we can change the dimensions of our window. So the width of our window is not a problem at 900, and as a matter of fact we could even make this a little bit wider. Let's make this 1100 millimeters wide. But we do need to reduce the height, so let's drop this down to 900 millimeters, and the error clears on our window. I'll just reposition our sketch here so we can get a better view of our window. If we want to, we could adjust the offset here so that it's more onto one side, and again we've encountered a window error, so we'll just adjust our offset back to 200. And as well the bottom offset. We could use this to adjust the height of our window, but it looked pretty good at 200 millimeters offset, so we'll just leave it set there. And then here we can choose the color of our window, currently set as white. We also have options for gray, black, green, oak, Irish oak, or rosewood. We'll leave it set as white. And when we're done adjusting these window settings, we can close this window. And now we can move on to the walls settings for our dormer. And here we can select the type of exterior cladding we wish to have. Either tile cladding, timber cladding, cement boards cladding, lead cladding, color render, cement render, or none. We'll leave this set as cement boards cladding. Then we can adjust the section size, currently set at 47 by 95, so we can leave that as is. And the stud spacing, set by default at 400 millimeters, which we'll leave as well. Then we can select the installation between the studs, either PIR, slab, foil, or none, and the size. And then we can select the installation over the studs, and the size. Then we can specify our roof settings for this dormer. So I'll just adjust our sketch here so we can get a better view of this roof. And here we have options of Ludlow tiles, Mendip, Double Roman, Ludlow Plus, Modern, Duo Modern, Anglia, Wessex, Plain, or Slates. So to match the style of our existing roof, we'll select Slates. Then we can choose the sections. Currently set by default to 75 by 145, we'll leave that as is. And the spacing as well, 400 millimeter spacing for the roof joists. And then we can adjust the soffit width, and we'll just adjust our angle so we can see that a bit better here. And we can use this slider to decrease the soffits or increase them. And we'll just input the value here of 200 to leave that at the default. And likewise we can adjust the ladder. And then we can choose installation for between the roof rafters and the size, insulation over the rafters, type, and size, and specify the materials we wish to use for the fascia and soffit, either UPVC, timber, or none. We'll leave this set at UPVC, and by default the rainwater goods will be included, but if we don't want those we can deselect that for the gutters and downspouts. We'll leave that selected for now. And that completes our dormer settings. So we can close this window, and if we wish to, add another dormer. Open the settings for this one, adjust them as needed, and that will add a second dormer to our loft conversion. In this case we only need the one dormer, so we'll just delete this second dormer by clicking the bin icon. And now we'll scroll down a bit and take a look at the finishes stage. And for our wall finishes, we have some options here. We can choose to either have plasterboard on battens, or plasterboard on stud-work, or none. In this case we do want our loft conversion to be finished, so we'll use plasterboard on battens. And then for the ceiling finishes, we have choices of none, plasterboard lining, plasterboard on battens, plasterboard on resilient bars, or suspended ceiling, and we'll just stick with plasterboard lining. For the floor finishes, we can choose from none, tiles, laminate, carpet, engineered or solid wood, vinyl, or LVT, so we'll select engineered wood. And then for decorating, we can choose whether we'll be painting the walls and ceiling, the walls only, or the ceiling only. If the client prefers to do their own painting, then we might select none. But in this case, we'll be doing that work, so we'll select walls and ceiling. Next we'll take a look at the carpentry stage. And by default, one staircase is included to access the new loft conversion. And this includes the staircase itself as well as the balustrade. If we wanted to add a second staircase, we could do so by adjusting the quantity here. We'll leave this set at 1. And then for decorating the staircase, we can choose either gloss, oil, wood stain, varnish, or none. We will include gloss with the staircase. And then here we can set the size of the stud wall. 47 by 95 is sufficient, so we'll leave that as is. And if we plan to have an internal stud wall, maybe to separate the stairs or separate rooms, etc., then we can choose our stud wall sections here. 47 by 95 is sufficient. And set the length of our stud wall. So here we might choose 5 meters. Now if we wish to have a door in this internal stud wall, then we can click plus add internal door, and then choose the type of door we want, either a normal door or a fire door. Fire doors are only sometimes required for a house, and usually not for a bungalow. So for this example, we'll choose a normal door, but your architect or drawings will let you know if you need to have a fire door or not. And then you can choose the door size. And we'll just stick with the default. And then for our internal walls and windows, we can choose to include or exclude skirting boards and window boards. We'll include both of these. And you'll notice that as we make these changes, that our summary is constantly updating to show our various specifications. So as we add skirting boards, that is added here in the carpentry section, and same with window boards. That is added here in the carpentry section. And lastly, we'll take a look at the extras section. Now, if you need scaffolding, you can make sure that this is selected, and then specify whether you need scaffolding for the front, rear, left, or right. For our example, scaffolding on the front, rear, and left will be sufficient, so we'll deselect right. And then we can choose to include building control fees, and this is set at £950 by default. You can adjust this if necessary. And then, if there will be any demolition, for example old tile or flooring that needs to be removed, you can select this here. By default, 2 8-yard skips are included, with an estimate of 85 hours of labor, and you can adjust either of these as necessary. And that completes our settings. So now what we could do is scroll up to the top here and adjust our visibility settings. And what we might want to do is remove the description summary to get a nice clean view of our finished loft conversion. And then what we can do is from various angles, we can take screenshots of this to share with the client. And it's also beneficial if we remove one of the layers, like the roof, and then take some extra screenshots of this to show this angle here as well. And remove the dormers, and remove the roof windows. And this will give you a gallery of images that you can share with your client. And bear in mind that as we adjust each of the visibilities of these, this does not affect our calculation whatsoever. This is only for visibility within the sketch. So when we're done making our changes, what we can do is close this, and go to the very top of our main stage here, and click the button that says Build Modules. And instantly PricerJob starts building each of the various modules required for this template. The entire process may take a minute or two, depending on your internet connection speed and system specifications. And in just a moment later, all of your modules are added to your left-hand panel here, completely calculated based on all the settings that we just specified. And you can see the details of any of these. For example, the steel beams. We could scroll this down to see our beams and columns, and open the specific module for each of these. And here we have all the details of our beam, including the materials and labor, all priced out for us. You'll notice that the modules are all organized by their category, including site work, structure, etc. But if we wish to, we can click the View by Rooms icon here at the bottom, and that sorts everything into the one room, which in this case is considered loft conversion. We can also choose to show or hide our profit here. If we just need to know the cost of this for our own calculations, then we can remove the profit. But if we'll be sharing this with the client, then we certainly would want to include the profit here. And to adjust our profit margins, we can use the cog icon here. To adjust our sliders, we might recommend having a materials profit of 30% to account for any market price changes. And for labor, plant and tool, and other costs, we can leave that set at 20%. If we are VAT registered, we can select here, and VAT will be applied to the client's invoice. If we are not VAT registered, then we'll be paying VAT on all the materials and labor as we go. In this case, we are VAT registered. If you wish to include a discount, you can specify that here as well by stating either a percentage or a fixed discount. In this case, we'll just leave it as no discount. And we can close this window. And if the client decides that they need to make any changes, perhaps they want to add an extra roof window, it's very simple to do. All we need to do is access the main template section here, go to our roof windows stage, and add another roof window. Maybe this one will be positioned on the side. So for this one, we will select the position on the right side, and then go into the edit settings here to adjust the offset of this, and increase the on-plan offset as well, so that it's a little bit higher to meet the Purlin wall. And to verify that, we might want to adjust our visibility and turn the roof transparent again. And we can see that we do need to increase the height of this still a little bit. So we go back to Window Edit and increase that slightly. Yeah, that seems sufficient. Okay, and now that we've made these changes, we can just go back to the top and select Build Modules. And this time, rather than rebuilding the entire template, PricerJob will only rebuild the modules that were affected by our changes. So this is a much quicker process. And we can see here is the revised estimate with the extra window added. Once the client is satisfied with the changes, then we can go to the Reports section here. And PricerJob includes the summary, as well as a detailed breakdown of all the various modules that need to be included. We can choose to show either a simple quote or advanced. With advanced, we can include or exclude the description, the materials, the labor, pricing, or units. And we also have options to show category subtotals, stage subtotals, and detailed breakdowns of materials and labor for each module. For our example, we'll just keep this simple with the totals. And if you prefer to have a quote that does not show the summary at the top here, we can just go back to our Calculations tab, deselect View by Rooms, and go back to our report. And this removes the summary and categorizes all of our various modules by module category, including the site work, the structure, the finishes, etc. And if you need to change any of these specific modules, say steel beams, maybe you want to input an allowance for this instead. What we can do is just go over here to the beams and post settings within the Loft conversion template. And rather than select manually, we can just choose an allowance. And we can set our steel allowance at £2,000. And close that. And then we can build the module. And it's just this one module which is being updated. And now we can see that our steel beams module comes to $2,600, which is $2,000 allowance plus the 30% profit that we applied at the bottom here. Now, if we need any extra modules that are not included in this template, like for example, perhaps we want to add some electrics, we could just go to the module toolbar and select that and add that new module and create. And this adds the new electric module under a new category for services. And say for this example, we want to have 2 pendants and 3 switches and 11 sockets. This new module is then calculated instantly and added directly to our total. Because it's not a part of our template, we don't need to rebuild the modules again. However, if we view by rooms, we can see that this electrics module is left separate from our Loft conversion grouping. If we want to join these electrics in with the rest of these modules here, we could do so by clicking the Options button here and select Edit, and then change the location from the General location, and we can see here in the menu that currently the electrics assigned to General. We can change that from General location to Loft conversion. And close, and now we can see here that Loft conversion is grouped as a single room, which does include our electrics module. However, the fact that we've moved our electrics module to this same room, titled Loft conversion, does not mean that the electrics module has been made a part of this template. So if we were to select the template options here and delete template modules, this would delete all of the modules that are associated with this template, which would exclude the electrics that we added manually. So if I delete template modules, all of these modules will be removed except for electrics, which is the only module that we added manually. Alternatively, if I were to delete the template itself, that would delete this template here, and the summary and all of its controls here in the right-hand panel. However, it would not delete the modules that we've already built. Of course, if you delete the template before you build the modules, then you will lose all of your work. And the other option that we have here is to rename this template. So let's remove the test from this name here and just call this Loft Conversion. And if you want to create multiple templates, let's say perhaps the client wants to add a second loft conversion above the garage, we could simply go back to the templates icon here in the module toolbar, select Loft Conversion. We might want to rename this one. Instead of test, we can call this garage to distinguish it from the original loft conversion, and create. And then we can go ahead and build out our various specifications for this one, build the modules, and that is added to our estimate. Here we have the original loft conversion, and if we scroll down, we'll see the loft conversion garage. If we take a look at our reports, the quotation is likewise separated into the original loft conversion, and if we scroll down far enough, we'll see the summary for the loft conversion garage. Now, if upon receiving this quotation, the client decides that they do not want to go ahead with the garage loft conversion, it's simple enough for us to simply go back to the calculations here. And for the loft conversion garage, which they have decided against, we can select the options for that. Delete the template modules first. We'll just delete all of those. And those template modules have been deleted. And our estimate is instantly updated. And if we wish, we can keep this template with all of our settings, just in case they change their mind in the future. We won't have to rebuild this template again. By having all of our work saved in the template here, it doesn't actually affect our costs here because we haven't built out the modules yet. However, if we're absolutely certain that they will not be proceeding with this loft conversion in the future, we can just simply delete this template and remove that entirely from our workspace. You would just want to make sure that you hadn't included any separate modules independently of the template, because they would need to be removed separately. And so with this number of detailed modules, PriceJob has already reduced days of work down to a few hours, but now with the use of templates, it's reduced it down to a few minutes. And that's how to use the loft conversion template. Thank you for using PriceJob.